Vineet sir. How are you? Welcome to the discussion.
Good evening. Thank you.
Right. So before we begin, I must tell you that all the discussions with you are so insightful that I think that without interacting with you, my understanding and the viewers' understanding also about higher education sector wouldn't have been so developed. So thank you for all the interactions that you have with us.
My pleasure.
Right.
My pleasure.
And today we have another set of questions for you.
Sure.
Right, sir. So I'll just shoot the questions. So in one of your statements, you said that philanthropy in higher education can make India a Vishwa Guru. So we would like you to describe this statement further. And let's also clear what philanthropy actually means.
Right. So I think let me start with the first one. And I do believe that in the last 15 years, the higher education capacity of India has expanded, which did not do so for a good 3 decades from the early 70s to almost 2000. And in the last 15 years, that expansion has happened both from the side of the government. Government has put up many new institutions, but
Right.
also the likes of Ashoka, Plaksha, Krea, Shiv Nadar, Premji, many philanthropically funded institutions have come up. And all of these institutions, because of their nature, because of their philanthropic intent, and the fact that they are private, they are more agile, they are less bureaucratic, they are pushing the boundaries of excellence. They're pushing quality in teaching. Now they are starting to push quality in research.
Mhm.
And this group of 8, 10 institutions, once it becomes 100 odd, 120, which I think in a decade or 15 years it should, then this group of institutions has the potential to really define quality in higher education. It's a little bit like, for lack of a better parallel, the IT revolution that started in the 90s with the likes of TCS, Infosys, and gradually has expanded to every nook and corner.
Mhm.
It has a catalytic effect. It inspires to people to join academia. Salaries of teachers, faculty is going to go up. When the quality of education goes up, students, India anyway has a large number of students who want higher education. They will
Right.
start getting an education that truly expands their frontiers of knowledge, makes them more employable, and delivers a quality that we have longed for some time. So this will also push the boundaries of research. Better research articles, better publications will start to come out. So the whole ecosystem in some sense will expand. Today there is no debate in the world that you want reliable, good quality software, India is the place to go to. Gradually we can build this reputation in higher education also. You want good quality, reliable, affordable higher education, India is the place to go to. And that's what I meant when I said Vishwaguru, that India would, in a decade, 2 decades, India has the potential to really educate students from all over the world. Students from Asia, students from Africa, Middle East, perhaps people from Europe and US too. Because if we are going to build institutions today in 2023 and for next 10 years, 15 years, our institutions are likely to be more modern than many institutions which exist around the world, right? So we will have contemporary institutions of high quality, and the world can send its students to study in India, pretty much like the world currently sends its students to the US, to Canada, to UK, to Australia. Those are perhaps the top 4 countries where students are going.
Right.
India does have the potential to become a Vishwa Guru, and I made that statement in that context. And as far as your other question of connecting philanthropy with higher education is concerned, philanthropy is money which is donated with no expectation of any return, right? That money can go into creating a temple. That money can go into creating a university. It can go into creating a museum. Pretty much anything. The what that money will do really depends on the donor. It's the donor's desire to say, look, I am making this contribution for XYZ reason. And it's really the philanthropic intent of the donor that determines where that money is going to be used for. But it's really money that is gifted, money that is given without expectation of any return. That to me is true philanthropy. And many of the top institutions in the US got built on philanthropy. In India, it started to happen. And I'm pretty confident that in the next decade and two, many new institutions will get built in this manner.
Yes, I believe, sir, Ashoka University was the first one to, in the modern India, Ashoka was the first one to, start with a philanthropic initiative to build universities.
Well, I won't say first. If you look at the early 20th century in India, the Tatas actually set up the Indian Institute of Science. They set up the Tata Institute. Right. Many great institutions were built by the Tatas, and the Birlas then built the BITS Pilani, and True. And so I think India has had a rich heritage of philanthropy to build institutions of learning, institutions of higher education. And those institutions, by the way, are still some of our best institutions. The Indian Institute of Science ranks number one Absolutely. In all rankings. Right. But then we had this 30-40 year period from 60s to pretty much 2000, as I say, when a lot of this philanthropy was missing from Indian corporates. And I don't know the reason why, honestly, but it clearly was missing. Till the time in early 21st century, 2005, 10, that started to change again. And now you see many, and India now has many wealthy people who've also created wealth in their own generation in the last 20 years, the last 30 years. And many such people are now coming forward and contributing. So.
Right. Okay. So, all right, sir. So we'll move to the next question.
Ashoka has pretty much, I would say, in the 21st century, early, then we are perhaps the first example, or maybe in the last 30, 40 years, Ashoka is the first example of this collective philanthropy. Also demonstrated clear excellence. So,
right. So also there has to be a push from the government that that they ask the corporates to start contributing towards higher education sector in through some way which can give a push to philanthropy, the idea of philanthropy in education. So I think in the last 30-40 years, do you think this push was also missing from the government's end?
Well, I would definitely say that this CSR Act of 2013, I think, which made mandatory 2% of profits of all corporates beyond a certain profit number has to be contributed to social causes, and higher education is one of them. So that has definitely helped for sure, because even taking Ashoka as an example or Plaksha as an example, many of our donations do come from CSR. It's not, I mean, we also get a fair bit of individual philanthropic funding, but I think CSR is a big percentage. So it has definitely helped. The CSR Act has definitely helped, which of course wasn't there before that. But I think more can be done. There could be even more backstops, specifically if philanthropic money is being used for institution building. I think that should have even a higher, it should have incentives, tax savings, incentives. And I mean, if you look at the history of US philanthropy and how some of these institutions got built, that has been a major reason.
Okay. All right, sir. Sure. So, sir, how important is the role of entrepreneurship in ramping up India's higher education sector?
Well, I think entrepreneurship is important. And here I'm talking of entrepreneurship really as the zeal, the energy, the passion to build organizations, to do new things, not necessarily entrepreneurship for profit. And
Hmm.
even though institutions may be built in a philanthropic manner, but I think it does take the entrepreneurial zeal of a collective people to build these institutions. Because unless some people are willing to really put their energy, their heart and soul, their effort into building these ventures can't come up. It's not very different from building a company,
Right.
from an energy perspective, from a time perspective, from a management perspective.
Hmm.
Your expectations of return may be different. You're doing this for the good of society, you're doing it for nation building, but the entrepreneurial zeal becomes extremely important. And
Hmm.
when you see great institutions around you, whether for profit or not for profit, you do find that there it is the entrepreneurial zeal of a few people that made this happen.
Right.
So the
Right.
same is going to be important in higher education too. The
Hmm.
entrepreneurial zeal of people, individuals, is going to help build great institutions. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt about that.
Right.
That
So,
zeal can cover up for a lot of challenges. You may feel today that, okay, you don't have land or you don't have money, or,
hmm,
but it's really entrepreneurial zeal that makes things come together.
right. 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 So, yes, I think we need a pool of entrepreneurs to start big universities, because it is not a one man's job. At the end, university is a big task, major task to be achieved. And definitely, a single person, it's very difficult for him to, being an entrepreneur as well. It's very difficult until unless we are, engaged with a lot of other entrepreneurs who can, contribute to the philanthropic initiatives. Right. So, what do you think is currently lacking in the Indian universities? That there are very few universities from India that rank in the global, top 500 universities. So, what is lacking currently in Indian universities?
So, Indian universities, if you pick up any research ranking, Indian universities tend to do fairly well. And I'm making a generalization on the teaching part.
Okay.
So, rankings have various parameters. Teaching is a big parameter, but the other big parameter is research. Research has high weightage, number of research publications, number of citations per faculty. So that is there's big weightage there. There is big weightage on internationalization. How many international faculty does an institution have? How many students do you get from outside your own country? And the third, where Indian universities don't do as well, is really also global perception. So surveys are carried out where the perception of a particular institution is checked by many people outside. So on these three parameters, on research, on internationalization, and global perception, I think Indian universities don't do that well, and hence we don't find that many Indian universities in the top 500 in rankings. So if research is a big part,
Hmm.
and if Indian universities have to go higher up in rankings, I think these are the areas that all universities will need to work on. Research
Mhm.
globally in most countries has been funded by government, because research does not have an expectation of immediate return. There's no sort of direct correlation between investment and return. Some research may not pay off at all, and some may pay off handsomely in times to come. So governments typically have funded research. Even in the US, DARPA and NIH after World War II, they funded research in a big way. And not only did the public institutions benefit, but universities like MIT, Stanford also benefited from that spending. India, the research spending is still very little. The government has articulated in the NEP that the National Research Foundation will be set up and research funding will go up. And
Mhm.
that is definitely required. I mean, the other funders of research can be corporates, although in the grand mix of things, that they tend to play a smaller part, because corporates often look for return on investment.
Right.
And but that mindset is changing, and some corporates are investing into research.
Hmm.
So once research funding is more available, research can be funded. This aspect of institutions, this particular aspect that contributes significantly to global rankings, can start to look better. It's already good in institutions like the Indian Institute of Science, maybe some IITs, and they generate some amount of research funding from government grants.
All right.
In places like Ashoka Plaksha, it started to happen. Research funding is going up, but it's going to take a while. The second one is really on internationalization. Uh, Again, Ashoka does attract many scholars from abroad. We actually are ranked number one in
Yes. Right.
internationalization
Right. Right.
in India. But on the dimension of students coming from outside and studying, I think every Indian institution has a long way to go,
True.
because students come to a different country not only because of high quality of education, but also for the lure of a good life. Indians, when they go to US or UK for higher studies, they are also then thinking that they will settle there, they will work there, they'll have a better quality of life. So it's not just about the education.
Right.
So
Right.
India is now the fifth largest economy. Perhaps in 2 decades, we'll be the third
Right.
largest, hopefully in another decade, but maybe 2 decades, we'll maybe the second biggest. And I think that's the time when India will also start to look attractive to people from outside to come and work in, right?
Right. Right. Right.
That combination of a high quality of education, which is affordable, and the lure of a good life can then
Correct.
transform India into a place where many people are coming. So even this parameter is going to take a while to change. And
Mm.
global perception, again, as our research output grows, on teaching, I think already the perception is fairly high. Many of our students, by the way, if you see, students who graduate from Indian colleges, they go to the best universities around the world and do
Right.
extremely well.
Mhm.
So we should appreciate that fact that Indian universities really have done an outstanding job of teaching,
Right. Right.
because
Mm.
otherwise our students wouldn't be doing well
Correct.
worldwide. But
Correct.
yes, on research, infrastructure,
Right.
etc., we have a long way to go. So if we can
Mm.
improve these three matrix of research, of internationalization, and global perception,
Mm.
then many more Indian institutions will feature in the top 500 in
500.
rankings.
The next, maybe next decade or next 2 decades. Right. So, sir,
Well, yeah, I think it will keep changing, and I think every year
okay.
you will see some progress. My
We'll
belief.
have more additions definitely every year in the global top 500. That is something that is definitely going to happen. Overall, it has been a great discussion today. Yes, like all the discussions, I'm sure this was very much insightful for me as well and the viewers also.
Thank you.
Right. So we'll catch up with you soon.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, sir. Okay. Bye.